I'm sick. Just about everyone that I know in London is sick right now, so please excuse my voice and let's pretend that I just smoked a cigar or something. Hello, welcome. My name is Dakota and we are really going back to our roots with this video. When I first started posting videos on the internet, it was more or less entirely strictly recommendations of the same Gothic literature over and over and over, because when I have a point to make, I'm gonna drive it home, and these are my favorite books. So this is a real homage to the early days. Gothic fiction, Gothic horror, Gothic literature, whatever you'll call it, was the reason that I decided to pursue literature in my adult life / career, which is the real horror, because pursuing art in this economy, that's the job scare. Side note, I just won Book Creator of the Year 2023, so this one's for all of the teachers that said that pursuing literature was devoid of any kind of meaning or purpose. Moving forward, let's define Gothic literature, what defines Gothic fiction, Gothic horror as a whole. Gothic fiction is a loose literary aesthetic for fear and haunting. Emerging in Europe in the 18th century, Gothic literature grew out of the Romantic literature movement. It's a genre that places strong emphasis on intense emotion, pairing terror with pleasure and death with romance. It employs dark and picturesque scenery, startling and melodramatic narrative devices, and an overall atmosphere of eroticism, exotism, mystery, fear, and dread. Now, what I love about Gothic horror, specifically Victorian horror, is whilst it is fascinating and intriguing and interesting and unique and terrifying and eerie and spooky and gets under your skin and erotic and at times completely feral, it's a direct reaction and commentary on the social norms at the time. The social climate was, well, repressed. Religion was posing all kinds of questions on mankind and morality, and the rapid advancement of science and modern medicine was quite terrifying, I'm sure. Imagine not knowing much and suddenly knowing many things. Terrifying. These literary responses, books, transgress social norms in a really kind of sexy and subversive way, and you'll find that a lot of the underlying themes of these books aren't just about horror and the macabre and the undead. They're also about queerness and feminism and mental illness and things of the sort. On that note, here are 9 Gothic horror / fiction recommendations that I truly believe from the bottom of my heart to be the creme de la creme. Coming in hot at number 1 on the list is, drumroll please, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And if you have been here for a while, you will know my perhaps unhealthy obsession with this book and the fact that I try and cram it into every single video. I mean, I've taken a break as of late because I should probably not recommend the same book in each video, but it's back and it's here to stay. I'm sure you know what it's about, but if you don't, it is about a greedy, insatiable, deathly curious scientist, Frankenstein, who decides to create life. He pours life into dead flesh. And what follows is a tale of so many questions posed about morality and human nature and good versus evil and who's the real monster. And if you say it's the creature, then read the book or read the book again, because boy oh boy have I got news for you. It is also ultimately at its core an incredible commentary on the terror that came with the advancement of science and modern medicine, and people were terrified because they didn't know what was happening. And I read that when Mary Shelley was thinking of what to write about this book, she was eavesdropping on Percy Shelley and Lord Byron's conversations as they discussed modern medicine, so very much spawn point of this book. It's morbid and it's gloomy and it makes you feel really alone while you read it, and I think it's actually really accessible as a read that has lots of underlying text that you can tear apart and analyze. I was really lucky that recently I went to the Booker Prize shortlist and they were doing tours, conducting tours at the National Portrait Gallery, and there was a portrait of Mary Shelley, and so we got some insight into her life and some fun facts. And I mean, I could talk about this forever and ever, but I'll save it because we have 9 more recommendations. But she was 19 when she wrote this. 19 years old. When I was 19, I was passed out in ditches, so let's not compare lives. Before I get too carried away, I'm going to stop myself here so we can have a very quick word on today's wonderful sponsor, Squarespace. I've worked with Squarespace many times before, and I love Squarespace because it is a platform that makes creating and maintaining websites simple and fun, which is perfect for passion projects turned professional. It's perfect for anything from online stores to blogs to things that are very helpful, and I'm in the midst of redesigning my own website. If you know me,
me, you know that I am a perfectionist, much to my own detriment, but what I love about Squarespace is it makes this process so easy and I am in full control. The fluid engine design system from Squarespace means it's never been easier for you to unlock your creativity. I can play around with elements like email campaigns, member areas, appointments, custom merch. I could keep going. It's so simple and so worth it and so important when it comes to having a presence, and it's also just fun to design and play with. You can go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your own website, go to squarespace.com/dakotawarren and save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Next up we have The Tales of Edgar Allan Poe. And this is my book, and obviously I've taken the slipcover off of it because I hate slipcovers, but this is incredible. And there are so many tales to choose from, so many different compilations of tales, but the one that I have particularly is The Bedside Companion. I have other ones, but this is my favorite. Edgar Allan Poe's writing style is notoriously gloomy and morbid and eerie and terrifying and gets under your skin, but also so beautiful and profound. And it's just really unique, and I remember reading his writings at a young age and influencing every single thing that I write from then on. And I mean, like, I can't write anything happy anymore. It has to be quite gloomy and macabre as per Edgar Allan Poe. As I said, he has so many short stories and a lot of poetry as well that I love, and the best way to consume this that I recommend is to just buy a collection, any random compilation of his works, and you'll find something to fall in love with. One of the most famous and one of my personal favorites, for good reason, is A Tale of Telltale Heart. Such a fun plotline. Essentially, the narrator is trying to convince you of his sanity whilst describing some heinous crimes that he committed. So very fun read, and get into that. It'll open up a whole new world for you. Next up we have another book that I cannot shut up about, and I mean, I constantly recommend the same books over and over to A, drive it home, and B, in case I have new viewers on each video. So this is Dorian Gray, The Picture of Dorian Gray from Oscar Wilde, and Oscar Wilde is one of my favorite writers of the entire universe of all time, and this book is in my top 3 books of all time. Let's talk about it. Such a fun and unique plot. I mean, essentially a boy, a man, if you will, he is beautiful. He's so beautiful and everyone talks about how beautiful he is, and then he gets his portrait painted, and by some magical turn of events his soul remains in the portrait and he exchanges that to remain youthful and beautiful forever. Now this book, I mean, anything Oscar Wilde writes is obviously going to be absolutely incredible, but what I love about this book, again, is the discussional points. You know, there's a subtext between Dorian and his painter Basil, and there's so much to talk about between them, you know, like, was it friendly or was it erotic? Did Basil deserve better? Was Dorian in the right or the wrong? There's so much to talk about regarding that relationship, but there's also so much to talk about regarding the emphasis that humanity puts on the worthiness of beauty and youth, and preserving this youthful beauty and making it last forever, because apparently that's what we're worth. This is my first page. I have scribbled all over this book. I think it's my most annotated book that I own, just because it is so goddamn incredible. Anyway, I think I've sold you enough on that one. Next up we have Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber, and this is a collection of short stories of retold fairy tales from these really interesting, kind of gory, dark, but feminist perspectives. Angela Carter is famously an incredible writer, absolutely incredible, and the life that she puts into these retellings of these stories is phenomenal and unmatched. And you know, I've been trying to chase that feeling since I read this. I think I'm due for a reread, actually. It is October, it is almost Halloween. She illuminates them so much, and she really gets to the core of each of these fairy tales and puts her own twist on them in a way that doesn't take away but adds value. And I mean, that's my opinion, of course. Everyone's gonna have their own opinion. She is notoriously a little bit prosy, and the prose can drag and be a bit pretentious, but that's my kind of prose. I have a type, and my type is convoluted and complicated wording. The next book is another book that I refuse to shut up about, and that is, guess, take 3 seconds to guess. This is Sheridan Le Fanu's Carmilla. Were you waiting for this one? I bet you are. This is the OG vampire text that predates Dracula. It's short, it's fast-paced, it's a novella. A lot of these are novellas or collections of short stories. I'm just trying to get you into the Gothic horror fiction world, but it's short and you can read it cover to cover because it's so interesting and intriguing. But what I love most about it is, whilst it is this standard vampire tale of vampire takes innocent soul, leads them out into darkness, blah 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 blah, there's an incredible sapphic subplot to this. Hell, it's not even a subplot, it's the main plot. The tension between the two girls, the vampire and the victim, if you will, is absolutely phenomenal and stirred something deep inside of me the first time I read this book. Think excellent prose, think sexy lesbian vampires, think perhaps the inspiration for Dracula. It is speculated that Dracula was inspired by this, so that aside. The next book is a short story, a tiny little itsy bitsy short story. Look at this, little baby. And that is Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. Tiny little baby. It is essentially about female hysteria. A woman gives birth to a son, and in postnatal hysteria / psychosis, her husband decides to take her away and lock her up, as men did in that era. Splendid, right? It's laid out as a private journal, and essentially the protagonist or narrator, she describes her scenery, and she has this yellow wallpaper that's peeling and flaking, and she absolutely hates it and can't stop thinking about how much she hates it. And through each journal entry is her chronological descent into further and further into her madness. This is an incredible exploration and commentary on the attitude and dismissiveness towards women with any kind of mental health problem in the late 19th century. I mean, how probably any time leading up to that, still relevant really. Incredible, short little fast-paced Gothic read. Add this to your list, it's a must read. We have 2 more books to get through and my camera's literally about to go flat, so we're gonna do this as good as we can. Also, I don't have physical copies of these books because they are back home, halfway across the world. So I'm reading off my laptop the blurbs and my notes that I've made, because usually I write my note to the start of the book, so bear with me for this one. First and foremost, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I put this as one of my book club books a while ago, which I have completely abandoned anyway. There's a reason this novella has stood the test of time. It is fascinating and so original. It's essentially about a London lawyer who investigates these strange occurrences between his friend and this other person, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The characters are so well crafted and contain so much depth, and it is genuinely such a fascinating, jam-packed tale. Again, it's quite short and really accessible in the way that it just displays what it is, and it's this interesting detective-like kind of recount of all of these situations of this descent into madness and realization of what is actually going on. Again, this is an exploration on the morality of man, good versus evil, human nature, and what happens if we give in to those dark things inside of us. What do we become? What will become of us if we feed into this duality of man? Fascinating book. Add that to your list. I know I'm saying that about every single one. I am so passionately, adamantly recommending you these books that you don't have a choice, basically. The last book is, controversially, because I notoriously despise this book but can see the brilliance in it, hence why I'm recommending it to you, because I'm trying not to be too biased. That is Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre, the protagonist, essentially has this horrible life of cold loneliness. She's orphaned, she has so many struggles and heartbreak, and you know, by the time she's an adult, she is destroyed, but she is so strong. She's a feminist icon in literature, apparently, which I completely detest and have different opinions towards, which I touched on in a video that I don't like anymore, but I mean, you can go back to it if you want to. She eventually finds herself as the governess of Mr. Rochester, the guy that she falls in love with, and people say, what a beautiful romance story. It's not. It's absolutely not. That's not the point of it. Anyway, this is the quintessential Victorian novel because it essentially details the power struggles between woman and man, and the female lead is trying to find her way independently, and that I understand the praise for it. At its time it would have been groundbreaking. At its time it would have been completely ahead of its time and henceforth condemned. I think that the main reason I despise this book was because we spent like 3 months on it at university, and I think I read it about 5 times, tearing through it and really kind of getting to the base of it. And it just made me, I mean, I had to write a lot of counter essays on a lot of popular opinions as to like feminist icon literature, write an essay about this, and so I'd go for against, and so I kind of indoctrinated myself to just hating this book. But you tell me what you think. If you've read it, I'd love to hear your comments. If you haven't read it, read it, and I'd love to hear your comments. Tell me if you think it's a feminist icon book and a romance, because I don't think it's either of those things, really. But I still think it's a good book in the way that it is entertaining and provides entertainment value. And Rochester has imprisoned his wife in the attic because she's gone mad, so perfect correlation between The Yellow Wallpaper and Jane Eyre. Anyway, my camera is literally about to go flat, so this is goodbye, I suppose. I hope you enjoyed this. This was fun for me. This was a really quick, it felt really quick. Have I been talking for a while? Anyway, I'm passionate about this. Sending all of my love to you this fine October. That's why I tried to get this video for spooky season, if you will, because what's better than Gothic literature in spooky season? Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. I love you.